Instrumental.
Instrumental.
He was instrumental in developing links with European organisations.
Instrumentalist.
Instrumentalist.
Instrumentation.
Instrumentation.
Aircraft instrumentation.
Instrument panel.
Instrument panel.
Insubordination.
Insubordination.
Howell was fired for gross insubordination.
Insubstantial.
Insubstantial.
The evidence seemed very insubstantial.
An insubstantial meal. The insubstantial outline of a ship.
Insubstantial ghosts.
Insufferable.
Insufferable.
An insufferable bully.
The heat was insufferable.
Insufficient.
Insufficient.
Insufficient resources have been devoted to the health service.
His salary was insufficient for their needs.
The heating is insufficient to kill the bacteria. At the moment, there's insufficient evidence to arrest anyone.
Insular.
Insular.
An insular community.
The insular world of the law.
Insulate.
Insulate.
Pipes may need insulating against the cold.
An insulated attic.
The royal family tried to insulate him from the prying eyes of the media. Insulating tape.
Insulating tape.
Insulation.
Insulation.
Good insulation can save you money on heating bills.
Glass fibre insulation.
Insulator.
Insulator.
Wood is an excellent insulator.
Insulin.
Insulin.
Diabetic patients requiring insulin.
Insult.
Insult.
Nobody insults my family and gets away with it.
I hope Andy won't be insulted if I don't come. They insult us by ignoring our complaints.
I won't insult your intelligence by lying. Yes, I told him.
She was shouting insults at her boyfriend. She was shouting insults at her boyfriend.
$200 for all that work? It's an insult. $200 for all that work? It's an insult.
Their offer was so low, I took it as an insult.
Some advertising is an insult to our intelligence.
Insulting.
Insulting.
Insulting remarks.
Sexist language is insulting to women.
Insuperable.
Insuperable.
There were insuperable obstacles, and the plan was abandoned.
As usual, the hero was facing insuperable odds.
Insupportable.
Insupportable.
Insupportable pain.
Her behaviour was insupportable. Insurance.
Insurance.
Your father took out insurance to cover the mortgage.
Insurance against loss of income due to unemployment.
Do you have insurance on your house and its contents?
We can probably claim the damage on our insurance.
My brother works in insurance.
The insurance industry.
How much is the insurance on your car?
An extra lock on the door is an added insurance against burglars.
Insurance adjuster.
Insurance adjuster.
Insurance broker.
Insurance broker.
Insurance policy.
Insurance policy.
Insurance premium.
Insurance premium.
Insure.
Insure.
Have you insured the contents of your home?
It is wise to insure your property against storm damage.
You should insure the painting for at least £100,000.
Many companies won't insure young drivers.
Take advice to insure yourself against being misled.
Insured.
Insured.
Apparently the jewellery wasn't insured.
I'm not insured to drive Anne's car.
Insurer.
Insurer.
Insurgency.
Insurgency.
Insurgent.
Insurgent.
Communist insurgents.
Insurmountable.
Insurmountable.
The language difference proved an insurmountable barrier.
Insurrection.
Insurrection.
An armed insurrection against the party in power.
Intact.
Intact.
Only the medieval tower had remained intact.
His reputation survived intact.
Intaglio.
Intaglio.
Intake.
Intake.
Try to reduce your intake of fat.
A high intake of carbohydrates.
Sickness may develop from inadequate fluid intake. An intake of around 120 students each year. A leak on the air intake to the carburettor.
Intangible.
Intangible.
The island has an intangible quality of holiness.
Intangible assets such as customer goodwill. Intangibles like pension schemes and holidays.
Integer.
Integer.
6 is an integer, but 6.4 is not.
Integral.
Integral.
Vegetables are an integral part of our diet.
Statistics are integral to medical research.
A racing car seat with an integral harness. A racing car seat with an integral harness. A racing car seat with an integral harness.
Integrate.
Integrate.
Colourful illustrations are integrated into the text.
Transport planning should be integrated with energy policy.
Computers of different makes that integrate with each other.
We're looking for people who can integrate with a team.
Many children with learning difficulties are integrated into ordinary schools.
Integrated.
Integrated.
An integrated public transport system.
A racially integrated community.
Integrated circuit.
Integrated circuit.
Integration.
Integration.
The integration of data from other surveys.
The family unit is supported by its integration into a wider social network.
Problems of racial integration.
Integrity.
Integrity.
A man of great moral integrity.
The territorial integrity of the country. Integument.
Integument.
Intellect.
Intellect.
He combined a formidable intellect with a talent for speaking.
Intellectual.
Intellectual.
A job that requires considerable intellectual effort.
Mark's very intellectual.
An intellectual film.
Intellectually stimulating.
A leading British intellectual.
Intellectualize.
Intellectualize.
Intellectual property.
Intellectual property.
Intelligence.
Intelligence.
To be good at the game, you need a reasonable level of intelligence.
John showed high intelligence from an early age.
A woman who had both beauty and intelligence.
According to our intelligence, further attacks were planned.
Intelligence sources denied the reports.
In Britain, there are 3 main intelligence organizations.
U.S. military intelligence.
Intelligence quotient.
Intelligence quotient.
Intelligent.
Intelligent.
A group of highly intelligent students.
Sontag was once famously described as the most intelligent woman in America.
An intelligent question.
You can't have an intelligent conversation with him.
Are there intelligent beings on other planets?
Forms of intelligent life.
Intelligent design.
Intelligent design.
Intelligentsia.
Intelligentsia.
Intelligible.
Intelligible.
His reply was barely intelligible.
The report needs to be intelligible to the client.
Intemperate.
Intemperate.
The judge's intemperate outburst.
Intend.
Intend.
I intend to spend the night there.
I didn't intend her to see the painting until it was finished.
I never intended things to turn out the way they did.
It is intended that these meetings will become a regular event. We intend looking at the situation again.
I fully intend to return home next year. The book is intended for children aged 5 to 7. It seems likely that General Rogers was the killer's intended victim.
Intense.
Intense.
Young people today are under intense pressure to succeed. The intense heat of the desert.
The pain was so intense I couldn't sleep.
He took an intense interest in all religious matters. A look of intense dislike.
The job demands intense concentration.
At least 3,000 people were killed in a week of intense fighting. She's a little too intense for me. He disliked Kate intensely.
Intensifier.
Intensifier.
Intensify.
Intensify.
In June, the Civil War intensified.
His mother's death intensified his loneliness.
An intensification of fighting in the region.
Intensity.
Intensity.
The intensity of the hurricane was frightening.
He spoke with great intensity.
An instrument which measures light intensity. Intensive.
Intensive.
A one-week intensive course in English.
A day of intensive negotiations.
A knowledge-intensive industry. Intensive care.
Intensive care.
He is still in intensive care in Bristol General Hospital.
Intent.
Intent.
She was intent on pursuing a career in business.
His intent gaze.
Intent upon her work, she didn't notice the cold. Intent upon her work, she didn't notice the cold.
Jake listened intently.
She behaved foolishly but with good intent.
Jones was found guilty of wounding with intent.
He is charged with possession of a gun with intent to commit a robbery.
The war was, to all intents and purposes, over.
Intention.
Intention.
I have no intention of retiring just yet.
They went into town with the intention of visiting the library.
It is our intention to be the #1 distributor of health products.
He thinks the minister is full of good intentions that won't be carried out.
Intentional.
Intentional.
I did trip him, but it wasn't intentional.
Intentionally vague promises.
Inter.
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 Interdepartmental. An interstate.
Interact.
Interact.
Lucy interacts well with other children in the class.
The immune system interacts with both the nervous system and the hormones.
Interaction.
Interaction.
Price is determined through the interaction of demand and supply.
The complex interaction between mind and body.
The degree of interaction between teacher and student.
Interactive.
Interactive.
Interactive computer systems.
The museum's interactive exhibits.
Interactive teaching methods such as role-playing.
Interactive whiteboard.
Interactive whiteboard.
Interagency.
Interagency.
Interagency cooperation.
An interagency task force.
Inter alia.
Inter alia.
The paper discussed inter alia, political, economic and social issues.
Interbreed.
Interbreed.
Intercede.
Intercede.
My good friend Senator Bowie interceded with the authorities on my behalf.
Intercept.
Intercept.
An attempt to intercept drugs being smuggled over the border.
His phone calls were intercepted.
Intercession.
Intercession.
Interchange.
Interchange.
The interchange of ideas between students and staff.
Interchangeable.
Interchangeable.
These two words are almost interchangeable. A camera with interchangeable lenses.
Intercity.
Intercity.
Intercity rivalry. Intercity trains.
Intercollegiate.
Intercollegiate.
Intercom.
Intercom.
The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Interconnect.
Interconnect.
A series of interconnected lakes.
Interconnecting rooms.
Our operating system can now interconnect with other networks.
In Freud's theory, the two areas of sexuality and violence are interconnected. In Freud's theory, The two areas of sexuality and violence are interconnected.
A number of separate but interconnected issues.
The interconnection between rich and poor countries.
Intercontinental.
Intercontinental.
An intercontinental flight.
Intercontinental trade.
Intercourse.
Intercourse.
Social intercourse.
Intercut.
Intercut.
Interdenominational.
Interdenominational.
Interdepartmental.
Interdepartmental.
Intense interdepartmental rivalry. Interdependence.
Interdependence.
The interdependence of our body's immune and nervous systems.
Interdependent.
Interdependent.
Countries with interdependent economies.
Interdict.
Interdict.
Interdisciplinary.
Interdisciplinary.
An interdisciplinary research centre.
Interest.
Interest.
My parents encouraged my interest in science.
I'd recommend this book to anyone who has an interest in jazz.
Ben has shown an interest in learning French. My mother had never expressed any interest in the garden. Babies soon begin to take an interest in the world around them. Babies soon begin to take an interest in the world around them. John appeared to have no interest in girls. I watched the first few episodes, but soon lost interest. The last round of bidding aroused considerable interest. Our survey reveals a disturbing lack of interest in teacher training. I read your article with great interest.
His interests include walking and golf.
As a biologist, my main interest has been human genetics.
Her outside interests were numerous.
A Persian rug will add colour and interest to your hallway. It's a book that will be of interest to a wide range of readers.
What you do in your private life is of no interest to me.
Art galleries, museums, and other places of interest.
Topics of general interest.
The interest on the loan is 16% per year.
How much are the monthly interest payments?
An account that pays higher interest.
The regulations were introduced in order to safeguard the interests of local fishing communities.
The court decided that it was in the girl's best interest to remain with her grandparents.
He has your best interests at heart, you know.
We've got to balance economic interests and environmental interests.
I believe it is in the public interest that these facts are made known.
The race was postponed in the interests of safety.
Just out of interest, how much did they offer you?
The company is believed to be keen to sell its extensive brewing interests. His business interests are spread throughout Europe.
In 1986, GM acquired a controlling interest in the sports car maker Lotus. Farming interests now dominate many of the national park committees. The majority of Brazil's huge commercial interests support the measure.
The need to reduce the influence of special interests.
I have no interest in continuing this conversation.
As a trainee reporter, she spent most of her time on human interest stories. As a trainee reporter, she spent most of her time on human interest stories.
Here's an article which might interest you.
What interests me is all the history of these places.
It may interest you to know that a number of scholarships are available.
He had always interested himself in foreign affairs.
The salesman tried to interest me in the higher-priced model.
Interested.
Interested.
I've always been interested in music.
All she's interested in is clothes.
I wasn't sure if he was really interested or if he was just being polite.
I'd be very interested to hear your opinion.
I've got a spare ticket for the opera, if you're interested.
Sheila's interested in starting her own business.
Would you be interested in a second-hand car?
All interested parties are invited to attend the meeting.
Interest-free.
Interest-free.
Interest-free credit.
Interest group.
Interest group.
Interesting.
Interesting.
That's an interesting question.
A really interesting TV programme.
I found his talk very interesting.
Did you meet any interesting people? It will be interesting to see what happens when he gets a bit older. It's interesting that no one remembers seeing the car.
Interestingly.
Interestingly.
Interestingly, none of their 3 children ever married.
Interestingly enough, Pearson made no attempt to deny the rumour.
His essay was clearly and interestingly written.
Interest rate.
Interest rate.
Interface.
Interface.
The book deals with the interface between accountancy and law.
Interfaith.
Interfaith.
An interfaith Thanksgiving service.
Interfere.
Interfere.
My daughter-in-law said that I was interfering, but I was only trying to help.
It's not the church's job to interfere in politics.
Anxiety can interfere with children's performance at school.
He was arrested for interfering with young boys.
Interference.
Interference.
I resent his interference in my work.
Industrial relations should be free from state interference.
Interferon.
Interferon.
Intergalactic.
Intergalactic.
Intergenerational.
Intergenerational.
Intergenerational communication.
Intergovernmental.
Intergovernmental.
An intergovernmental conference.
Interim.
Interim.
An interim report.
He received an interim payment of £10,000.
An interim government was established. During the interim period, air quality has deteriorated.
The child will be adopted, but a relative is looking after him in the interim.
Interior.
Interior.
The interior of the church was dark.
The car's warm interior.
The interior of the country is mainly desert. The interior walls are all painted white.
Interior decorator.
Interior decorator.
Interior designer.
Interior designer.
Interject.
Interject.
That's absolute rubbish, he interjected.
Interjection.
Interjection.
Interlaced.
Interlaced.
Patterns of interlaced squares.
Interlink.
Interlink. A chain of interlinking loops.
Interlock.
Interlock.
A puzzle with 500 interlocking pieces.
Interlocutor.
Interlocutor.
Interloper.
Interloper.
Interlude.
Interlude.
A brief interlude of peace before a return to the battlefield. A romantic interlude.
Intermarry.
Intermarry.
Over the centuries, these Greeks intermarried with the natives.
It is not unusual for royal cousins to intermarry.
Intermarriage between ethnic groups. Intermediary.
Intermediary.
Jackson acted as an intermediary between the two parties. An intermediary role in the talks.
Intermediate.
Intermediate.
A book aimed at students at the intermediate level and above.
Intermediate learners of English.
An intermediate stage during which the disease is dormant.
A ski resort suited to beginners and intermediates.
Intermediate school.
Intermediate school.
Interment.
Interment.
Interminable.
Interminable.
Interminable delays.
An interminably long speech.
Intermingle.
Intermingle.
The pain and the anger were intermingled.
Intermission.
Intermission.
Intermittent.
Intermittent.
The weather forecast is for sun, with intermittent showers.
Intermix.
Intermix.
Intern.
Intern.
Internal.
Internal.
We have no interest in interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. The threat to internal security.
Internal markets.
There's to be an internal inquiry into the whole affair.
The internal mail.
They've knocked down a couple of internal walls.
Internal doubts.
The matter will be dealt with internally.
This medicine must not be taken internally.
Internal combustion engine.
Internal combustion engine.
Internalize.
Internalize.
Internal medicine.
Internal medicine.
Internal Revenue Service.
Internal Revenue Service.
International.
International.
The response of the international community.
The UN and other international organizations.
International dateline.
International dateline.
Internationalism.
Internationalism.
Internationalize.
Internationalize.
Internationally.
Internationally.
These days, businesses have to be able to compete internationally.
An internationally famous sculptor. International Monetary Fund.
International Monetary Fund.
International relations.
International relations.
Internecine.
Internecine.
Internecine warfare.
Internee.
Internee.
Internet.
Internet.
Do you have access to the internet?
You can find all kinds of information on the internet.
Internet.